Hey, good people, welcome to Russ Can't Fly, licensed private pilot. Let's get it! Okay, so before I jump into this video, wanted to get some subscriber shout outs. Subscribers made all the difference in my journey. The support was amazing. So I'm going to continue to do these subscriber shout outs because you, the subscribers, are the key to this whole channel, the success of the channel, the success of my steps. And just because I've gotten my license doesn't mean that the journey is over. Oh no, we are just getting started. So let me send some subscriber shout outs to Josh Robinson, Parody Show, Purcell Berry, and Michael Carter of the Michael Carter Show. Thank you all for subscribing to the channel. It really means a lot to me. The support has been amazing and it has been greatly appreciated. Okay, let's jump into this video. Okay, so as I mentioned in my last video, and I'm laughing because my last video was, I mean, it was the culmination of 2 years of, you know, of a journey. But in my last video, which I'll post up here, if you haven't seen that video, that is my actual check ride day, the actual day that I got my license. I talked about what I wanted to do next. And in these next 3 videos, what I want to do is help out my fellow student pilots to break down how I've tried to make this thing that's so big called the private pilot check ride smaller and put it into bite-sized pieces so that I could approach it in a way that just didn't feel too overwhelming. And so this first video will just deal with how I prepared for the check ride. What did I do? What kind of materials do I have? Or what kind of materials did I purchase? And what kind of things did I put together to try to make this thing manageable? It is a really big deal. It is your first exam that you're gonna take with a designated pilot examiner or a DPE. And so it feels big because it is big. It is pretty much the beginning of everything. So what I thought I would do while this is still fresh in my mind, I would do a 3-part series of the check ride. The first video, which is this one, is gonna be all about how did I prepare for the check ride? What kind of books do I have? What kind of equipment do I have? How did I prepare for the actual check ride day? The second video will be the oral portion of the check ride. What you can expect, the best way to try to study for, and some of the aids that I use that were absolutely helpful. And then finally, the last video is gonna be the actual practical exam or the flight portion itself. That's where I'm gonna detail some things that I did to try to prepare myself mentally for the flight portion. And if you looked at my check ride video, one of the primary things that I prepared for that day for flying was praying. For me, that was everything. Prayer works. But there are some other practical things that you can do in addition to praying that I think will be helpful for trying to focus in on this big monumentous day called the check ride. All right, so now that I've laid that foundation, let's jump into this video. Preparing for the check ride. Okay, so I'm going to go over some materials that I think are absolutely crucial to preparing for the check ride. So there are 2 or 3 books that you absolutely must have in order to prepare for the check ride. The first, of course, is the FAR AIM. Now, the FAR AIM, or the Federal Aviation Regulations, and the Aeronautical Information Manual is absolutely crucial. These are the rules and the regulations and the law that dictates what we can do as pilots, what you can do on the airplane, the rules of the road, airspaces, everything. You absolutely must have one of these. And the one thing that I will say is that whatever year that you're going to be taking your check ride should be the current FAR AIM. If you had, for instance, a 1998 FAR AIM, this book would be incorrect in terms of the ADSB out requirement, because that was something new in 2000. Sometimes there are modifications to a rule or a particular regulation, and so you want to make sure that you have the most current FAR aim. Plus, it will make you look professional once you're sitting in front of that DPE. Now, as you can see, I've tabbed off some things. The most important thing that I did up here is I tabbed off the major components for the FAR aim. So part 43 is all about maintenance. And then part 61 is all about certification of pilots. So I tabbed that off. And then part 91 is pretty much the general operating and flight rules. So I pretty much broke that down in terms of the three major parts of the FAR aim, just to kind of make this manageable. And then, of course, I have a tab between the aim and the FAR. So just so I can get to it quickly. So the most important thing is I will talk more about my tabs when I talk about preparing for the oral, but I definitely recommend getting a recent copy of the FAR aim. If you think your check ride isn't going to be until sometime next year, go ahead and get the 2022 FAR aim. Don't wait. If you've already tabbed off a book for 2021, then basically do the same exercise in the new 2022. Two things that'll do. Number one, you'll have the current FAR aim, which is very key. But two, it'll actually reinforce your knowledge of what's in the FAR aim by switching your tabs from one to the other. Okay, so the second book that you absolutely have to have in order to prepare for the check ride is the Airman certification standards for whatever it is that you're going to be doing, you know, your check ride for. So for me, it was for the private pilot. And so this publication is going to look like this. Now, here's one of the things that I probably should have done. My ACS book was a little older. Fortunately, that didn't hinder me as much, but you want to make sure that this date is as close to the most recent date as possible, because sometimes there are changes in here that you want to account for. So this is something that you absolutely must have. I will explain what these tabs mean when we talk about the oral portion, because these tabs are very important and they're going to play a crucial role. So the ACS standards are crucial because it's going to lay out what the examiners are going to be using when you do your flight portion. And we'll talk more about ACS standards when we go to video number 3, when I talk about the actual practical exam or the flight portion. But you definitely need to have one of these books because it gives you the criteria and the standards that you must meet in order to pass your flight portion of your check ride. But here's another interesting thing that I think will be very helpful in preparing for the check ride in the ACS book. On this page, as you can see, there's actually a little checklist, and it walks through all of the things that you are supposed to have when you are ready for your check ride. And so here I basically checked everything off. Did I have all the aircraft documents, the airworthiness certificate, the registration certificate, the POH or the operation limits, you know, my logbooks, were there all the ADs compliant, that kind of stuff. Personal equipment, personal records, it goes through the whole list. You should get one of these books and check each of these off. If there's anything missing, especially up in here, you got a problem. You want to make sure that this gets worked out. You don't want to get to your check ride and something is missing. You can't find the airworthiness certificate, or you forgot to bring a view limiting device so you can do simulated instrument, or your aim isn't current, or you don't have a pilot logbook with the proper endorsements from your CFI. So this checklist is crucial. So that's why this book is very powerful. Okay, so a third publication, I definitely recommend that you get this and just read this thing over and over and over again. This book will prepare you for the oral portion of your check ride, and we'll talk more about its strengths and weaknesses. This book was extremely helpful in basically preparing me for the oral, how to talk about these things. Now, let's be clear, these are not the regs. So don't quote this book as the regulatory scheme for any particular requirement. For that, you got to go to the FAR AIM. But this will help you kind of break down how to say the words or how to answer the question. So this is definitely pretty crucial to have as well. The other thing that I will say to you is we'll talk more about the oral and how that works, but just as an aside, this book will not be going with you during the oral exam. Do not pull this out, and we'll talk more about that later, but this is something that I think is helpful. Now, one of the pieces of equipment that I bought and I think that was extremely helpful was a knee board. So I bought this knee board here, and I think it was just very good in terms of having something strapped to my leg that was very simple with pieces of paper and things like that. But the other thing is it also had, you know, some crosswind component stuff. If I forgot, you know, stupid stuff like which, you know, if I'm flying a course of, let's say 090, what is that? 3,000 plus 500 feet because east is odd, all of that kind of stuff. But then it's also good for what we call cockpit management. So get yourself some sort of knee board or something where you can keep all of your stuff kind of clipped to your legs so stuff isn't moving around the phone. Just don't sit in your lap. I did that during a couple of my flight lessons, and my cockpit management just sucked, so to be direct about it. So get yourself a knee board. Now, another crucial document that you're going to have is a sectional, but please, I beg you, make sure your sectional is current. So we're going to talk more about sectionals later when we talk about the oral, because that does come up during the oral exam in terms of looking at your sectionals. But if you see here, if I was doing a check ride today, I'd have a problem because this sectional has already expired. Please do not embarrass yourself by going to a check ride with a expired sectional. If I were to do a check ride today, I would already have the next sectional on deck so that I could do that. Okay, so those are some of the materials that I think are absolutely crucial and must-haves in order to prepare for the check ride. FAR AIM, private pilot oral exam guide, the ACS, a good knee board, and a current sectional. I think those, of course, you're gonna have things like your plotter, your nav log, and all of that kind of stuff. That's assumed that you're gonna have that kind of stuff as well. But those are kind of like the crucial pieces that I think, you know, will help you prepare for a successful check ride. Now I wanna get into a tool that I created for myself to try to make this whole thing manageable. And what I did was, I actually got this idea from some other pilots, was to create a binder. Now, the thing that I love about creating this check ride binder is it is a way to have one-stop shop for all of your documents, and it's also a great way to impress the DPE. So I'm going to show you what my binder looks like. Just run through it. We're going to do some more in-depth digging through as I talk about the oral, but I just kind of wanted to show you an overview of what I think would be a good tool for you to create in order to make this manageable. One of the things I will say about the check ride is you have to manage yourself. That was the biggest challenge. My nerves were going crazy. I've never been so nervous before. And yes, I've done things like, you know, take the bar exam. I've run track. I've had to do presentations, all of that kind of stuff. And I can't think of a time where like I was literally shaking. And so the more you can feel that you're prepared and you have a command of all of these different pieces and you have them in control, I think the better you'll be able to manage yourself. And so this binder was absolutely key. yes, it looks like it's a lot of work, and it is, but when I went into my oral portion of my Checkride, I knew that I had everything there that I needed and I could flip to if I needed to get to it. So let me kind of show you what my binder looks like, what's in it. I'm just going to go over this quickly because we're going to dig in a little bit more in video number 2, but I just wanted to do some preliminaries. So this is what my binder looks like, and yes, I put like a little title page and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I did was I had my FTN number. That's the number that's going to be basically in your IACRA, and it will basically go with you for, I guess, the rest of your flight career. So I had the FTN number right on here, and this was actually helpful for the DPE because he looked at it a couple times as he was doing stuff on his computer to, you know, look at my application and all that kind of stuff. But what's in this binder? The other thing that I did was I've taken it out, but I had a little sticky here, and I had my IACRA password right here because you're going to be nervous, and if you have to log into your IACRA, trust me, you're gonna fumble your password. So just put it in there for the day on a sticky. Now, in my binder, you see I have these, and it's not real high tech. I have credentials, exams, the airplane, right? I have things like weight and balance, my nav log. So these are the biggest sections, and then there's like in the POH, which I made, you know, particular copies of. I did some of that stuff out of the POH and the aircraft maintenance records. So let me just go real quick, and like I said, we'll dive in a little bit more. But for credentials, I had a copy of my driver's license. I had a copy of my student pilot certificate. I had my medical certificate. Again, it's going to all be in your checklist, in your ACS. And then my exams. I had my passing exam, and the reason why the ACS, and we'll dig more into these because that's why you got to have the ACS standards, and we'll dig more into that. And of course, this is the one where I failed. Boo. And then I took the my instructor endorsement for my ground school, which was King Schools. Shout out to King Schools. And then some stuff for the airplane. The air, let me see, this is the registration, the airworthiness certificate, and then the airframe. And this is where I got into all of the maintenance stuff to make sure that all of the inspections and stuff were done. And again, we'll dig more into that. And then I did like a sheet that breaks all of these down. So, you know, when the 100-hour was done, when the altimeter was inspected, transponder, ELT, we'll get into all of that again, but I did a separate sheet for that. Then I got into some stuff like the POH, because you're going to want to know, you know, your L hand. What kind of engine do you have? Lycoming, 0320, dark drive, normally aspirated, air-cooled, blah, 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 blah. And so I had all of that kind of stuff in and tabbed off so that I could find everything quickly if I needed to. Then the next major category, I had my weight and balance. So I had all of these sheets here to show where the arms, you know, to calculating my CG for the front passengers, rear passengers, and stuff like that. Of course, the loading graph, so I can do the fuel, if it's 40 gallons, 30 gallons, how, you know, and what the pound inches or the arm is for that. And then I did my nav log, and then of course my nav log is now here because I had it out, you know, on my knee board, so I just didn't put it back in the plastic. But I had my nav log here. And then for my brief, I did WX brief, so I had that electronically. And most importantly, my IACRA generated application. You absolutely want to print out your application once you have filled this out with your CFI. I will tell you now, that is something that came up. You do not want to go into your Checkride and not have a hard copy of your actual Application. That system could be down, you're sitting there, you can't log in, you have no application, and you're kind of screwed. So definitely go in, print out a copy of your application, and take it to the Checkride with you. The DPE did ask me if I had a copy, because he knew just as well as I do that there was a possibility that we try to go on FAA's website and it won't let us in, or it's down. So definitely do that. So this binder, which we'll talk about some more, was key because I was ready. Anything that was thrown at me, it was right here in this binder. And I think, yes, it took me weeks to put this together. A lot of printing out stuff, a lot of finding stuff. But I'm telling you, this thing was like so beyond powerful. I can't tell you how comfortable I was during the oral, knowing I had a binder with everything at my fingertips. So as questions were coming, if I couldn't remember, it was right there. So if he asked me when the next inspection was done, when it needed its next registration, I was able to pull it out and say, okay, here's the registration, here's when it's going to expire, here's when the next one is due. Boom, done. So I definitely say do yourself a huge favor and create this binder. You may be thinking, Russ, that's overkill. I'm telling you, this really made the difference. Not only did I have all the material, but psychologically, again, you have to bandage yourself. Psychologically, I just felt so ready for whatever was going to come my way. So I highly recommend that you put together a Checkride binder. Okay, so that's the first video, and hopefully you find that helpful. If you have any questions about anything that I talked about in this video in terms of preparing for the Checkride, please leave a comment. I want to be as helpful for future pilots as I possibly can be. I know that people have helped me. I've been able to ask some questions, and it has been great. Also, the other thing that I wanted to say to you is you have another resource that I want to tell you about that you should avail yourself of. Every Wednesday from 8:30 to 9:30, the Roscoe Draper chapter of the Black Pilots of America has a ground school. I'm going to put the website up so that you can see where to go. You go to the bottom of that website and there is a Zoom link. Everyone is welcome to that ground school, and it is actually helpful for all levels. So if you're interested in doing a ground school and hearing some other professionals, it is taught by a professional and extremely well-recognized, highly respected pilot. You definitely don't want to miss it. So again, that's another resource. And again, if there's anything that I said in this video that you have a question about, do not hesitate to send a comment or put a question in the comments. All right. So with that, that concludes part 1 of 3 of the Checkride Debrief. So Russ Kid, Russ Can Fly, licensed private pilot. Oh, I love saying that. I'm out. You guys be well, be safe. Peace.